Welcome to episode 134 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we turn to a volunteer from the 2010 FIFA World Cup whose story is a bit different, Amrit Daya. Amrit Daya, good afternoon, sir. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon, Adam. It was nice meeting you, speaking to you on the phone. You gave me a pleasant surprise. And I thought, well, I hope now this may be my last interview, and all the various people that have phoned me. And I thought, well, let me give you the pleasure of having my interview. And I'm feeling very well. I just celebrated my 90th birthday last Saturday this time. And we had a big function. Thank you very much. So otherwise, I'm feeling fine.
Amrit, it's an honor to chat to you today. Having been involved in the World Cup myself in South Africa in 2010, it's always great to talk to other people that were involved in the tournament itself.
Yes, you were involved?
Yes, I was. I worked for FIFA during the World Cup. I was based at Soccer City during the tournament, and it was an amazing experience. But we're not talking about me. We're going to be talking about you today. Amrit, as you mentioned, you're 90 years old now, and during the World Cup you were 79, which made you the oldest volunteer during the World Cup in South Africa in 2010.
That's right. 10 days later, just when the tournament came to the end, I turned 80. So that is how I'm the oldest. Became a non-Nigerian or something, whatever they call it. So that was just as the tournament ended in 2010, I turned 80. And now, 10 years later, not knowing that I'm still in demand, I turned 90 last week. So it's been a great pleasure, and I've been blessed with good health and still be able to communicate and still remember the World Cup. You know, it's still vivid in my mind. And I want to, as I said to the FIFA people in Zurich, that it was the greatest moment in my life to have taken on such a project and to have appointed me. And then they told me there were applications from 69,000 people throughout the world to apply to be a volunteer for the World Cup. And then I filed in an application in 1989, the year before,
2009. Yeah.
2009, thank you. And then my son said, well, you retired, try and see if they'll accept you. So I filled in the form and then forgot about all the World Cup application. And then about 6-7 months later, early in 2010, I got a call from the local LOC crowd to say they want to interview me. And when I went for an interview, they were all surprised to see there was a 80-year-old guy wanting to act as a volunteer. He should be really be in bed rather than helping. But I said, I'm fit as a fiddle. I don't feel my age, and I'd love to be a member. And so instead of them grilling me, I grilled them.
Excellent.
And he was appointed as a volunteer, and they made me a team member of the group. And they asked me what category.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'd love to get onto your World Cup story, but I'd also love to understand who Amrit was before the World Cup. As a younger man, growing up as a young man, were you always interested in sport? Did you always have a love for sport, in particular football, or did you just love all sports as a young man? And did you play any sports as a young man?
Yes, thanks for asking me that question because, I was sort of like a general factotum and I loved all types of sports, And the very first sport I got involved in when I was a very young man, still schooling, we started off with table tennis. And then afterwards I got into badminton, follow. And then as I grew up and went into high school, we were playing cricket and soccer on the ground. But our schools at that period in time was not of a very high standard, and we had to play on stones and all that type of thing. But nevertheless, we concentrated on soccer mostly and cricket. Of course, cricket was my favorite game. And then after that, I played for the Aryan Sports Club, which was a cricket club come sports club, which catered for other sports as well. And then I was a very mediocre sportsman, but was more interested in the administration side. So I became the secretary and chairman of the club and treasurer, and did my bit to put the club on the map and played various league games for the local. In that period, due to the apartheid system, there used to be an Indian league, in the Indian Cricket Union, Colored Cricket Union, African Cricket Union, and of course the European Cricket Union, which was the most well organized union because they had all the facilities, all the very best facilities. And to make matters worse, we couldn't go and see their matches in the local grounds here. We have one of the oldest cricket fields in Port Elizabeth called the St. George's Club, St. George's Stadium.
Park, yes.
And we didn't know how things would change. One day we would be able to become a democracy where everybody would become one. But when we were watching cricket and soccer and rugby at this Port Elizabeth Stadium, when we used to go to test matches, they had certain sections set aside for non-whites. And we all went and got stuck into little corners. And of course, sometimes there was a lot of little needling going on, and sometimes turned out into a bit of a riot because of the color friction. But all that eventually disappeared when the Nationalist Party came into government, and they turned on the screws and they made everything separate, and nobody could play cricket against one another. So we had to abide by the laws, or otherwise, what happens is that they would have terminated all our fun and games. So it was Indians playing Indians, and each one playing their own. And then we used to try and play interracial matches, coloreds and a match between coloreds and Africans and Indians and what you call. Of course, the whites kept to themselves and they had nothing to do with us. And they never made no attempt at all whatsoever to try and integrate with us. For they were fearing the authorities might be offended with them and prosecute them. So in the meantime, we accepted that this is the norm in South Africa. We had to accept that we were going to live apart and segregate, live among ourselves until 1960, when the Group Aiders Act came into power. Then the enforcement of the restrictions of separating people became very, very fierce. We were eventually thrown out of our homes where we lived in the mixed areas. I was living in South End, which was a cosmopolitan area. And then eventually we had to move to our our own allocated areas. So we came to live in Malabar, which was an area demarcated for Indians only. So nobody else could come and live in our area other than Indians. And similarly, with the colored uh, areas, and the Africans, of course, were stuck into one corner in the western areas. But of course, the bulk of the city was in the hands of the European people, and they enjoyed the best of everything, and they has the best homes, the best houses, the best fields, and of course, still there was no form of association with them, and we accepted life that this is going to be our fate, and live immediately as segregated people, not knowing that I would be alive till 1994 when the new elections took place and South Africa became an integrated society and became a democracy where all those very, very laws that kept us apart were thrown out of the window by the new government, that is the ANC government. And therefore today, you and I can speak freely of our past without being, without being detected, because there were spies all over us. We had to watch our backs and see who's hearing us and who's not hearing us, just to avoid imprisonment.
And
So
Amrit,
we
I'm
had
just sorry, just following on from that, from a very sort of difficult past that South Africa had. Obviously, we had the great Madiba who united the country, and he very much united the country through sport. First, the 1995 World Cup, then obviously South Africa won the 2010 World Cup, and it was two huge moments for South Africa in terms of uniting the country, uniting the nation. Tell me a bit about how you, having been through a lot in your past, felt when South Africa were awarded the 2010 World Cup.
Yes, that's a very interesting question, because prior to that, many years ago, the non-white people in general were trying to invite the Kenyan, the Asian club from Kenya to play amongst us. And we also extended an invitation to the West Indies to come to South Africa to play amongst the blacks. And that being a segregated whole thing. And there was so much opposition to that. So that whole program fell through. So we couldn't play to test our strength against other countries. That program also fell through. So eventually, when in 1994, that was the biggest year in our lives, that democracy came about and the elections took place. And when all laws were abandoned, we were allowed to play anybody, join any club. And it was through the grace that we had a leader, an international icon called Nelson Mandela, who was highly respected. And whilst in prison, he was negotiating for the takeover of the country, and was very successful in having a bloodless takeover that where South Africa became one. And then I never in my life, when I was a youngster, ever saw any international games or heard about it, because most of the countries boycotted South Africa and never sent any teams and never sent any people of color down. I understand you may have heard about Basil de Oliveira. It was a colored gentleman, one of the best cricketers in South Africa. And my brother-in-law managed to get him to England. And that's how he got involved with the English club. And eventually, with being such a great, brilliant South African, he was picked for the British team. But on top of that, when he was selected to play for England, to tour South Africa, then there was the South African Prime Minister called Mr. John Foster, who banned that cricket tournament, not to allow the British to come in with Basil Oliveira because he was a non-white. And if you see Basil Oliveira today, he looks more than white than anything else. But that's by the way. So eventually, we still were segregated at that period. But when as I said, from 1994 onwards, everything that was restriction, all the restrictions that kept us in our pigeonholes was all destroyed, and then all the various international sporting clubs eventually recognized South Africa now because of the non-political interference, started recognizing the South African government because it was now a government that involved all its members of its various communities that lived in the country. So when the efforts were made by the soccer people, now cricket wasn't a very strong type of game amongst the African people, but soccer and boxing were their favorite sports. And then the television started rolling, and then got the people to understand what was the sports were like when we started seeing the various types of sports that were being played all world over and is now brought to our screens. So the soccer was one of the biggest entertainments for the African population, being the indigenous people in the country and being the poorest of the all. And soccer was by far a beautiful game, but it was the cheapest game for them to play because they only had to have a uniform and some soccer boots, because there was no such a thing as sponsorship in that period. So soccer took on to such an extent that it became that the South African Football Association started organizing tours on the continent, on the African continent, playing against other African nations. And that's how it grew. And then in the meantime, they applied to FIFA to become part of FIFA, which FIFA eventually recognized and accepted us with open arms. And then when the time came for allocating of the world tournament to countries throughout the world, of course, there's always been a clamor from various countries to stage such a world tournament. And this being one of the biggest tournaments in the world, it was huge, and it needed people of wisdom, and people that had manpower to have controlled such a well-oiled organization. The South Africa first application was turned down in spite of Mr. Mandela being present in Zurich. But then, fortunately, it was a good move for being turned down, because for the following of the 4 years later, we managed to get the 2010 club tournament stage in South Africa. And I can tell you, Adam, that this was a moment in the lives of the entire whole of South Africa. You know, there was so much disunity in the country that it brought about a great sense of achievement and happiness and brotherhood within the entire country. And it was just unbelievable to understand that we were living like brothers and sisters, and like nothing has happened in the past. So I'm sure you went through that motion as well in 1994 when the games were elected was when the games were given to South Africa. Of course, Mr. Blatter was one of the main guys behind the scenes, but he left he didn't leave a very good record behind, because soccer is what it is, where, where monetary gains are involved, people are always there. So I don't have to
Absolutely.
tell you what.
Absolutely. And Amrit, I mean, as you say, it certainly united the nation, and it was an amazing time for everybody in this country. Amrit, you obviously got the role of a volunteer. Tell us a bit about your role during the World Cup and where you were based and what you did. And I see that you've got some memorabilia there next to you. Maybe you can show us a bit of that as well.
Yes, I will. Yeah. Well, when when they nominated me, I said I'd like to be in protocol. I would like to be at the airport to welcome the VVIPs, and being a senior man who would welcome senior VIPs and direct them to the various stations that they were supposed to go to. I was at the information desk at that period. But can you imagine at the age of 80 and I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be at my desk at 6 o'clock for the duration of the tournament. But that gave me great pleasure. I always get a big kick out of doing service for various communities. Besides my soccer life, I've been a bit of a social worker in my own way, helping communities wherever I can. So that was one of my biggest passions in my life, which I achieved, helping as many people I could. But anyhow, coming back to soccer again, I went to the airports and welcoming the. Meanwhile, I was so inundated with telephone calls and interviews from various international TV stations to interview me because they couldn't understand a man of my age wanting to be a volunteer. But I surprised many when they saw me. And then thereafter, the first people that they got hold of me was CNN, and then it was the ETV, SABC. The French government gave me a lot of exposure, and I became sort of a celebrity. I became the Lionel Messi of volunteers. But anyhow, that was a great being there and directing the people to the various areas where they have to go to. So the protocol was my part of the job. And
of the
of
very
course,
successful World Cup.
Stipend. We all got a stipend, but it wasn't worth anything, understand? But the fact is that to be part of an international organization was the biggest thing in my life. And in 2010, I would say it was a golden year, because in that year, I even missed my daughter's graduation at the Rhodes University because I was at the one of the biggest gatherings where all the volunteers were, and it was my 80th birthday celebration, and my wife and I, we enjoyed our 60th wedding anniversary. Now it's the 17th wedding anniversary in 2020. And there were many milestones in that particular year that I will never ever forget it. And you could see all these little memorabilia that I've got here. There's still tons of it, which I kept for safekeeping. So 2010 was, as I said, a year that I will never forget, because meeting people, and my biggest what do you call, was whenever I used to see English Premier Leagues on TV. Well, I'm a Man United guy, and when I saw standard of soccer amongst the clubs, it was of such a great standard that they were like test matches in themselves. And then watching nations uh, 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 playing against one another was even greater when I used to watch it in the stadium, which is your background. I tell you, and then prior to all this, I was on the civic committee of the city council, where I belong to the faith groups, where all the different faiths met and offered prayers for various ceremonies that took place during the building of the stadium, and we offered our special prayers for its safety and that everything would go off in time. And eventually, I was also partook in that. And at the opening of the ground, and I was present there as well, of which I have tons of photos in an album. So I feel that I was really part of something great, and for that I'm truly ever grateful.
Well, you certainly were part of something that was great. I think it's probably one of the greatest moments in South African history. And it's great to see that you've still got all of your memorabilia and that you still, thrive on remembering the tournament. Amrit, did you get to any games? Did you watch any games at Nelson Mandela Stadium?
Yes. They were. P was allocated 8 games over a period, and when these people arrived, unfortunately, all the players had to get off at another part of the airport for security reasons. One can understand that. But every game that was played there in Port Elizabeth, I was present. I saw that I had to see these games, because I'm not going to see countries playing countries in another time, another lifetime. So I watched every game, and I must say I enjoyed that part of my life, and I'm still enjoying it now. But right up to now, because you guys are still in 10 years later, I'm still being given some recognition for the past. But unfortunately, the people in South Africa did not recognize my what you call position, that I am the oldest person holding the world record for South Africa. And I got a letter a month ago from FIFA in Zurich, where the events manager told me, confirmed, that I am the oldest volunteer. And I would like to get it done in the Guinness's world records. I want them now to confirm it, but I do not know how far you can get. I'll leave that in the hands of the people. And once it's recognized by Guinness's, then I hold a world record. I asked, they said, FIFA said they had a lady from the Caribbean who was in charge, who was a volunteer at the age of 90. But she was concerned with the netball games of play on the beach, beach ball. The beach ball games. She was a volunteer for FIFA in the Caribbean. So she probably, because she's 90, she holds that record. But I think from the soccer point of view, and soccer, of course, is the biggest game ever to be recognized throughout the world, from the most poorest countries to the richest countries, that soccer is one of the best and most beautiful games ever to be played. And I want to still hope that they will recognize me as the, as the what you call record holder for the world. But at least I'm holding the South African record.
Well, Amrit, even if you don't get recognized, we certainly recognize you as an amazing person, an amazing age to be involved in such a World Cup. Amrit, was there one specific moment during the 2010 World Cup that really stood out for you as your favorite memory from the tournament?
Yes, whenever I watch the matches played in England, in England, I think it's Trafford, they call it
Trafford, yes.
Trafford soccer ground. So when, and whenever they play, the grounds are full of flags. Every player and every club members and supporters had their little corners of the various nations flying around, filled the whole stadium. And when I saw that particular scene in my hometown, I just could not believe my eyes that I was watching this whole thing on TV when they played in England, and it's played before my eyes in my own hometown. That was the most outstanding moment in my life, from seeing how the British, especially the supporters, and the singing that goes with it. It was really the cherry on the top, that I feel that I've now seen everything.
Yes. I having been working on the tournament, I didn't get a lot of time to spend with the supporters, but my wife certainly did. She went to all the games at Soccer City, and she made friends with Mexican supporters and German supporters, and it was amazing how the whole world just came to South Africa and just united around the country. And there were the Dutch supporters in their orange, and there were Brazilians in their yellow. It was just amazing how the whole world was just focused on South Africa.
Yeah, you see, as Mandela said, sports is a great unifier. It knows no color, and everybody that enjoys soccer will always, look at it as a game that is something to remember, because of the way it's played in such a classic form. It's so highly organized that nobody can ever tell me that they don't like to see a game of soccer. Of course, rugby is coming up, coming up very fast to try and take over the fame of international soccer, but they might just get there, but it will never overcome soccer itself. So we also in the rugby world, we never used to know much about rugby, but once we saw it on TV, I sort of became a rugby fan myself, and South Africa has now captured the World Cup twice. There's another feather in the cap of South Africa.
Yeah, and just in closing, before we say goodbye to you, your birthday, which was last Saturday, is also on Mandela Day, which was his birthday. That must be also a very special thing for you.
Yes. Well, everybody, whenever it's mentioned, I sort of share my birthday with Mandela. We both happen to be born under the same star, and we both seem to have likes and dislikes, and things that 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 Mandela does for mankind, for humanity, be a person of standing. I share all his views because that is life. That is what life is about. To be live an honorable life, to live a life where you can offer your service selflessly, and that's one of the greatest achievement of Mandela, and which I tried to do a bit, which I feel I played my part. But in the case of Mandela, that for him to go and spend 27 years in jail and come out a bitterless man, a man without any bitterness, that he went to his enemies. When he came out, he went to go and meet the people that sentenced him to prison, and the wives of the cabinet ministers of the nationalist government, for him to go and humble himself and still make friends with him. It's a man. It's really a great gift to have such an attitude in life, and I admire him for that. I feel that one must not have that bitterness in one. I used to be a bitter person myself, but there was a lot of apartheid, and I used to hate every white man for that matter. But then in 1960, my life changed around when I became spiritually inclined, and my spiritual life turned around, and I found a place in my life where my spirituality started creeping onto me, and that changed my whole view in life, where you don't hate anybody, but you hate policies, or you hate the things people do, but you don't hate the person.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
forth. Yeah. So I do love everybody.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear, Amrit, because your country certainly loves you and the service that you gave it in 2010. Amrit, thank you very much for joining us today on Sport SA Daily Diary. It was lovely to chat to you. An honor to hear your stories. Yes, good luck for the future, and keep watching your football and your beloved sport.
Okay.
Catch us again tomorrow on Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to South Africa's leading gymnastics coach.